Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to paint your doorway with blood to save your family? This wasn't a scene from a horror movie. It was a pivotal moment in history that changed the course of an entire nation and established one of the most significant religious observances that continues to this day. The year was approximately 1446 BCE. The Israelites had been enslaved in Egypt for 430 years, building cities for Pharaoh under brutal conditions. Their backs bore the scars of whips, and their spirits carried the weight of generations of oppression. But God had heard their cries and sent Moses, a former Egyptian prince turned shepherd, to demand their freedom. Despite witnessing 9 devastating plagues, water turning to blood, frogs overrunning the land, livestock dying, and darkness covering Egypt, Pharaoh's heart remained hardened. He refused to let the Israelites go, but God had one final, decisive plague planned, one that would break the chains of slavery forever. God spoke to Moses and Aaron, giving them specific instructions for the Israelites. Each family was to select a perfect year-old male lamb on the 10th day of the first month. They would keep this lamb for 4 days, caring for it, ensuring it had no defects. On the 14th day at twilight, they would slaughter the lamb in a solemn ceremony. But the most crucial instruction was yet to come. The families were to take the lamb's blood and paint it on their doorposts and lintels, the top and sides of their doorways. This blood would serve as a sign, marking the homes of God's people. Inside these blood-marked houses, families would gather to eat a specific meal: roasted lamb, bitter herbs, and unleavened bread. The bitter herbs represented the bitterness of slavery. The unleavened bread symbolized the haste with which they would leave Egypt. There would be no time for dough to rise. They were to eat this meal fully dressed, sandals on their feet, staff in hand, ready to depart at a moment's notice. God's warning was clear and terrible. At midnight he would pass through Egypt, striking down every firstborn son and animal in houses not marked with blood. This would be the final plague, the one that would break Pharaoh's resistance and secure Israel's freedom. The Israelites followed these instructions precisely. As night fell, families huddled together in their homes, the blood of lambs marking their doorways. Children asked questions about this unusual ritual, and parents explained its significance, beginning a tradition of remembrance that would span millennia. At midnight, a cry arose throughout Egypt. Death had visited every Egyptian household, from Pharaoh's palace to the poorest servant's dwelling. Every home not marked with blood lost its firstborn son. But in the Israelite homes, protected by the blood of the lamb, families remained safe. Pharaoh, having lost his own firstborn son, finally relented. In the middle of the night, he summoned Moses and Aaron, ordering them to take the Israelites and leave Egypt immediately. The Egyptian people, fearing for their lives, urged the Israelites to go quickly, even giving them gold, silver, and clothing. That night, approximately 600,000 men, plus women and children, began their exodus from Egypt. They left carrying the unleavened dough on their shoulders, just as God had foreseen. This massive population of former slaves marched out of Egypt after 430 years of bondage, witnessing God's powerful deliverance. God commanded the Israelites to commemorate this night forever. This day shall be for you a memorial day, and you shall keep it as a feast to the Lord throughout your generations, as a statute forever. The Passover celebration was established, a yearly reminder of God's protection and deliverance. The symbolism of the Passover resonates through history. The unblemished lamb, whose blood provided protection from death, foreshadowed greater spiritual truths. The careful selection of the lamb, the painting of blood on doorposts, the shared meal, and the readiness for departure all carried deep significance. This event marked the birth of Israel as a nation. No longer were they just slaves in Egypt. They were God's chosen people, delivered by his mighty hand. The Passover night demonstrated God's power over the false gods of Egypt, his faithfulness to his promises, and his protection of his people. The impact of this first Passover extends far beyond that night in Egypt. For thousands of years, Jewish families have gathered annually to retell this story, eat the symbolic foods, and remember God's deliverance. The tradition continues today, with families worldwide celebrating Passover Seders, teaching new generations about God's faithfulness and protection. The blood on the doorposts stands as a powerful symbol of divine protection and redemption. It reminds us that salvation often requires both faith and action. The Israelites had to trust God's promise and apply the blood as instructed. This story teaches us about obedience, trust, and God's power to deliver his people from seemingly impossible situations. The Passover story reveals how God can turn moments of great darkness into dawn of deliverance. It shows his attention to detail, his concern for his people, and his power to overcome any obstacle. This narrative continues to inspire hope in those facing oppression and reminds us that God hears the cries of his people and acts on their behalf.